As a child, I often wondered what was beyond the darkness. As I grew older, this fascination never faltered. Ontario is a great source for the paranormal. With a population of 13 million and faces passing by without ever noticing one another, it's hard to stop and appreciate its rich history. But it's not just the history we often overlook. It's the untold stories behind the history we refuse to acknowledge.
The ghost story at University College is a really famous ghost story in Toronto, and it involves a man who worked in the construction of the building back in the 1850s.
That man's name was Ivan. While Ivan worked on the U of T campus, he fell in love, but that love was not meant to be. One evening, on his walk home, he caught his lover falling into the arms of another man, a man that Ivan worked with, his friend Paul. Paul hid behind a door while Ivan slashed away. Ivan was so fixated on forcing the door open that Paul eventually got the best of him and stabbed Ivan to death. Paul hid the body in the foundation of the building, thinking it would never be found.
1890, there was a fire that hit the building and it burned up a lot of the inside, and they had to go back, they had to do a lot of repair work, and they were digging around the base of the tower, and they found the skeleton of a man hidden away behind the tower. That was in 1890, more than 20 years after the students had started to tell the stories.
Gone are the days where simple words led to a great story. In order to appeal to a generation of instant information, one must adapt the way these classic stories are told.
We're competing with an internet and TV generation right now, and to be able to tell them, let's go back 100 years and let's do storytelling. It usually doesn't sell as well as you think it would. So what we're doing is we're reinventing the idea of Victorian storytelling, bringing in dramatic actors, people who can convey these experiences and almost put the listener in that place.
And it's really cool because you get to dress up in you get a top hat, a waistcoat, a big cape. The cape was the big seller for me.
I think ghost stories and history kind of go hand in hand. And some people will tell you that the ghost stories remind people more about the history, which is great. But also I would say it works in the other, to the other extent as well, in that history makes the ghost stories make more sense.
There are very few people out there that can tell these stories well, and these are the people that can keep the business of fear alive.
The reason we got into this business of fear is that we love telling the stories of these historic locations. You tell the history, you have to tell the ghost story as well. And we were very interested in both sides, so it kind of spanned from there. The website at hauntedhamilton.com, it was stories about these locations, histories, and then it just seemed natural that we would go into doing ghost walks and events, hopefully to scare more people.
I guess what really motivated me to get into the business of storytelling and trying to scare people a little bit and all this kind of thing is that there's a great allure in those kind of stories for people. I don't really go out to frighten people, but I think I enjoy sharing the mystery of these stories, and other people enjoy hearing them.
Well, a lot of people don't like being scared, but there's nothing more exciting than scaring people. Sometimes on the tours as well, like if the tour goes out 2 tours, so I'll take the first tour and then I'll finish off my tour like half an hour before the next person, and then when I finish everybody will leave, and then I'll go hide in a bush and wait for the next tour to come, and when they get there I jump out and scare them.
The War of 1812 is the source of Niagara-on-the-Lake's mysterious hauntings. With such violence and many deaths, it's no wonder Niagara-on-the-Lake is notoriously known as being one of the most haunted places in North America. In order to recapture this experience, we headed to Niagara-on-the-Lake to meet up with David Green, who told us some of its infamous stories.
The gateway, the doorway to the tunnel which leads to Fort Mississauga, which is just around the corner over here.
Fort Mississauga was the third fort built after the War of 1812. It was completed just as the war was finishing. However, it was no ordinary structure. It was built from the rubble, the pain, and the blood of a town that was burned to the ground, the town of Niagara-on-the-Lake. Many say that if you stand at a certain point in the fort, you can still hear the tormented soldiers marching by.
Just to imagine like the soldiers and everything that have been walking through these halls through the years, really ominous and creepy.
The Camp Thompson Mississauga house has a much darker atmosphere.
People call it the old legend house, or the old abandoned house in Mississauga.
The house was built in 1818 and stands as the only abandoned house in a rich area of Niagara-on-the-Lake. It's said that every time the house is renovated for sale, something goes wrong and a fire engulfs the interior. Yet, something keeps the exterior structure standing to this day.
At night time you get the feeling of being watched, like people you don't, whatever inhabits this building doesn't want you to be around, doesn't want people around here. Obviously it doesn't want people inside as well. Whatever is here, this is their building and they'll do what they can to keep other people away.
Now I've heard things, I've been told things that it didn't make a lot of sense but make you think ghosts exist. But the one and only time that I saw something was at the Hermitage ruins in Ancaster. I went around the ruins to call people back telling them we have to get out before the security guard locks us in for the night, which wouldn't be a good situation. So as I walked around the ruins, I see two people walking towards me. Thought nothing of it. I called out to them, we have to go, the security guard's gonna lock us in. They ignored me. I called out a second time, and the second time I called out, they turned and they walked into the forest. Now it's late at night, it's dark, so I got scared because I know there's the path where they walk. I ran up with my flashlight, shone it in, only seconds behind them, and there's nobody there. My partner Stephanie was standing behind me after she heard me yell the first time. She watched me yell the second time. She saw me yelling to nothing.
I think so. Well, I know there's a lot of unexplained things that interest me.
I'm always asked whether I believe in ghosts or not, and my answer is always the same. I don't know. I'm always on the fence. You got to kind of stay in the middle. If you're too much of a believer, everything you see and hear is a ghost. If you're too much of a skeptic, you're not going to believe anything you hear.
And I would say that I believe in some of them more than others in some cases.
Whether you believe in ghosts or not, it's important that these stories get told to preserve our past. A lot of these ghost stories stem from historical events where people sacrificed their lives for our freedoms today. These ghost stories are a way of preserving the rich history behind the people and the past.
What I always like to remind people at the end of every tour is that there may be no reason to be afraid of the dark, but sometimes there's every reason to be afraid of what's beyond the dark.